If you guys have been following along, you will know that I bought one of my dream cars, which is a 1985 Foxbody Mustang GT with T-tops, mind you. In this video, I wanted to show you guys kind of what we're starting with, a little more in-depth into the car, a lot of hidden treasures that I'm finding, as with any new car, especially a classic car, what we're going to end up redoing, modifying, and what kind of butchery we're going to end up fixing. Now, overall, the car has good bones, and I didn't pay a lot for the car in general, so I'm still super excited. So I want to start with the exterior of the car. Now, from 10 feet away, the car looks great. It looks beautiful. But as you get close up to it, you'll notice all of the many flaws. The side trim molding is peeling off on both sides, and the trim molding is a little bit wavy. Along here on the rear bumper, I mean, it's got 40-year-old wear and tear where the paint's chipping off and the fiberglass is starting to show through. At some point, somebody put a saline wing on it, which it actually doesn't look too bad. I almost prefer to have the stock wing on there. One thing that makes me want to swap it out is someone had hit it with something and cracked the fiberglass. So the fiberglass and the paint is all cracked. Overall, it's a small blemish on it, so the rest of it actually looks pretty clean. What I really love about the front end on the 85-86 is the lower bumper valance has slots in this bottom hole here, and someone went and actually hacked those out, which I'm kind of bummed about because I actually really like that part of the grill bumper. And what I've seen to find a common problem for these cars, because they were, because the hoods were swapped and they were raced, at some point in time the hood had flung up and bent the cowl. Now, it's not the worst that I've seen. I've seen some that are way worse and the cowl has to be completely cut out. This one overall I think can be massaged and fixed, at least good enough to put a new grate over it. When that happened, this is an aftermarket hood. The corner cracked and it's got some blemishes and cracks in the cowl hood itself. Again, these are not big deal things to me. Cosmetic stuff can always be fixed. Plus, if the car was too perfect, I wouldn't want to drive it anyway. So this kind of gets the roughness out of the way. And I personally feel like I can enjoy the car a little more. I want to move on to the interior of the car next. It is also in rough shape. It has the stock 85 dash and steering wheel, but just like every other Foxbody that's on the market, people butchered in aftermarket gauges for the water, oil, and the tack. Somebody put a carpet style dash pad, which I'm not too crazy about. I'd like to get rid of that. The seats are, I'm not sure what they are out of. The car does have a roll cage already in it. It's an 8-point roll cage that is honestly not the greatest construction. When they did the cage, they also did a makeshift rear seat delete out of really tinny aluminum sheet metal, and it's all riveted and caulked to seal it up. And it looks like garbage, to be honest. So eventually I'd like to rip that out and actually either modify the cage so I can fit a back seat, because I would love to have a stock interior in this car, minus the front seats, which I've been tossing around ideas for what I actually want to do with those. A little more support. But I'd love to modify the cage in order to fit a back seat in the back. Again, I haven't decided on that yet. But if I do decide to keep the cage the way it is, I'd love to rip out at least that rear seat delete and bend up a nice aluminum one that actually looks decent. Now, another big thing is this car has a fuel cell. I believe it's a 15-gallon. It's just a universal, nothing special. There isn't even any baffles in it, so when you're actually driving the car, you can kind of hear it sloshing around, which I don't like at all. It makes me a little nervous. So I'd love to put a stock fuel tank back in it, and that way I can actually fill the car with the filler neck and gain some trunk space back, because I want to be able to road trip this car. I don't want this to be a full-blown race car and not be able to put anything in the trunk and not be able to have passengers or anything like that. Another big thing to stand out if you were paying attention with the hood is the decals. 289. The guy I bought it from claimed it has a 289 and was built and all that stuff, and you can tell just by the idle that it's not really built. It's probably just a stock bottom end. It's got like a old school Edelbrock RPM air gap intake with an aftermarket Holley carburetor. The car was converted to points for some reason, not sure why, but the more I was doing some digging, the more I'm led to believe that it's just a 302. I was hoping that maybe if it was a 289, it would have been a high performance 289, because why else would you put a 289 versus a 302? I pulled the valve cover, looked at the casting number on the cylinder head, and if it was a high performance 289, it would have had a casting number of 19, 20, or 21. And that would have indicated that it had high flow heads, and also if it had screw-in rocker studs. Now this one does not have screw-in rocker studs, and the casting number was a 51, which a buddy of mine who is well versed in 302s said that that's a later model 302 head. Also, when I went to go find plugs for the car, the 289 plugs were way too big than what I pulled out of the car originally. Now, normally a dipstick location for a 289 would either be in the front of the valve cover, because some applications were a front sump engine from what I understand, or if it was a passenger or driver side mount, it would have gone straight into the oil pan. Now, looking into this one, there's actually a hole or an orifice. There's actually a hole in the side of the block that is meant to accept the actual dipstick itself, and they only had those on the 302s. Again, from what I understand, I am not an expert. So we pulled the dipstick out and looked up the part number, and it says it's from an 86 to a 93. Looking for the casting numbers, which are roughly behind the starter, right at where the oil pan mounts to the block. And while I can't really see behind the header, between the header and the starter and all that stuff, I couldn't feel anything, any numbers on that area anyway. And on the 302s, later 302s, they had the casting number on the mounting ear for the bell housing on the tranny. The casting numbers were on there. And when you look in there with my phone and camera and light, you can faintly see some numbers scratching through the paint. If it was a 289, I would have liked it to be the high performance, and I wouldn't actually mind having 289. However, since it's not a high performance 289, I'd rather just have a 302. Start with that, with what the car came with. And speaking of the casting numbers, as I was looking for the casting numbers and using my phone to try to peek in the side of the block, there is a nice glob of JB Weld on one of the freeze plugs. You can't physically see it from up here, so I didn't catch it when I was looking at the car. But when you use a mirror or use your phone to look under there, you can see it sitting there. Now, I don't know if the freeze plug itself was leaking or if the actual block itself was rusted and crusted and they just decided to slap JB Weld on it as a hacked fix. Now, it's not leaking, so the JB Weld is working. So as of right now, I'm just going to leave that alone. And then when I actually pull the motor, I will chip away at the JB Weld, see what we're dealing with and whether or not the block is actually junk or not. It'll also kind of determine the direction we decide to go for the motor itself. Again, unfortunate, but it is what it is. Another thing wrong with the car is the wiring. The headlights do not work. There is a rat's nest of butchered up wiring just hanging out right there next to the old school MSD box, which does work. But I am led to believe that at one point, some wires of some kind got caught in the mechanical fan and shredded some of them up, because they look like they've been either chewed up by a mouse or shredded up in a fan. Hopefully I can just get like a firewall forward wiring harness or something like that from an 85, instead of having to try to sort through all those wires and rewire everything. The car does have a full exhaust. It has some old unknown brand name long tube headers to an off-road H pipe to some Flowmaster style chamber mufflers, and then some cobbled together over the axle tailpipes. That is something that I would like to completely rip out, start from scratch, and build a custom system for the car. It would really open everything up and make it sound a lot throatier. So I have a lot of ideas conjuring up for what I want to do there. I want to do something a little different than what people do. A little creative in that area. Took it around the block for the first time. And of course we had to power shift it and see what the car has in standing form. And we broke the shifter. I believe there is 2 bolts that hold this handle onto the actual shifter itself. And one of them either came loose and popped out, so now it just pivots on that one bolt. And you can shift it, but you have to grab it down here and shift it that way. That's pretty much it for the car. It's pretty rough, but it has good bones. It's a great starting point for a fun little car. I'm super excited to start diving into this car and seeing what other treasures we find. Hopefully not any more JB Weld, but if we do, you guys will be the first to see it on the channel. So stay tuned for more videos. Thanks for watching. See you on the next one.